Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is Deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On this show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, joint ventures, strategic alliances, real estate, affiliate and sponsorship deals, franchising, and more. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for over 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest podcast. Let's get started. Neal Cobb is a serial entrepreneur and deal maker who built and exited businesses across very different industries. He started his career as a chiropractor, building a high-volume clinic from the ground up before diving into tech, where he co-founded Skipcart, a last-minute delivery startup. They raised over $20 million in venture funding, scaled to 100,000-plus drivers across the U.S., and exited to 7-Eleven, all within 3 years. He's now co-founder and CRO of EquityX, a private equity firm focused on acquiring legacy businesses and turning them into employee-owned platforms. I love that because that's not what you normally associate with PE investment, and we're going to get into that. In the first year, they closed 2 acquisitions, DCI, a concrete and ramming contractor in Las Vegas, and Zistos, a industrial camera manufacturer. Combined, they generate over $35 million in TTM revenue. What sets them apart is his range of experience, from small business to venture-backed tech to private equity, and his people-first approach to deals. At EquityX, they focus on preserving legacy, aligning teams, and creating long-term value, not just flipping businesses for quick returns. Neal, I'm excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, appreciate the intro, and thanks for having me on, Corey.
Yeah, so listen, I'm excited to get into all this. I mean, obviously, people have certain assumptions when they hear PE. And, some of them are false, but, a lot of them are true in terms of the usual PE mindset of investment and expectation of returns and timing of exit and things like that. But before we get into that and how your model is different and your extensive background in deals, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because I'm guessing, certainly a PE investor probably wasn't it. Maybe a tech startup founder maybe wasn't it. And I don't even know whether a chiropractor was it. You tell me.
I've had a lot of iterations of what I wanted to be over time, and it's continually morphed and changed. If you go back to when I was a kid, I would say even up to my first year in college, my job and what I thought I wanted to be was a pharmacist. So I grew up in a small town, South Texas. My dad owns a pharmacy, and he actually recently shut it down about 2 weeks ago. So 45 years in business, but that's what I wanted to be. And so that was the path. And then I was about 6 months into UT. I was working on my undergrad, focusing on being a pharmacist. And then I saw about 15% of my dad's business vanish overnight from these other pharmacies that were mail out, where they were mailing to the local nursing home. And the local nursing home was 15% of my dad's business. And I saw it vanish overnight. And I said, okay. And that was, 2004. And I said, okay, I can see the writing on the wall that pharmacies were eventually going to be mail out. You were going to have robots or something take it over time. And these small pharmacies were in a struggle. And actually fast forward to now, and 30% of independent pharmacies closed down last year.
Wow. Well, you saw that 20 years ago. That's, that's amazing. All right. And then, so one other question looking back, and then I want to take the progression. What was your first deal of any type, whether it was something small when you were younger or early in your career, anything you consider a deal?
A deal or a hustle is the question.
I don't know. Whatever comes to mind is fine.
I was always doing some type of business, whether it was, I'm a high risk taker. I would say the first real deal, I created like a group of guys where we'd roll dice at school, and I'd get people together rolling craps. And I learned really quickly that if you had the most money, you were essentially like the bank, just like Vegas is. And if you had the most, you were likely going to leave with the most. And so I was the bank. Everybody was rolling essentially against me. And the odds were not in their favor because they didn't look at the statistics ahead of time.
I love it. I love it. It's amazing how many, I spend a lot of time in the entrepreneurial community, whether it's with my clients or I've been a member of Entrepreneurs Organization for a long time, president of New York chapter, all this stuff, entrepreneurs over the world. I love the backstories of all the different hustles, we had when we were kids or younger, because usually most of us have those. Although some people come to it later in the situational entrepreneurs, or they work, in corporate and then start a business. But, those of us who have those early stories is always fun for me.
I started working at my dad's pharmacy when I was 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And so every summer I would do inventory, and then I also cleaned all the display cases. And I guess one of my first business negotiations was when I was about 7 or 8. I went from a quarter per display case, and I told my dad, I went back to him, I said, I want to get 50 cents per display case. I had to negotiate my prices with my dad. So I started that early on.
I love it. I love it. I won't tell. I haven't told in a while, but I won't tell it. My mom has a great negotiating story about getting her to come to school and cook when I was like in 3rd grade. And now
there you go.
I sort of convinced her to do that on what probably in hindsight was a bit of false pretenses, but I won't go into the details on that. So all right. So now, you were thinking you're going to be a pharmacist. You see some things, pretty early that you identified it could be challenges. And then you become a chiropractor. How did you turn to chiropractic?
So I met a guy at UT. His dad was a chiropractor. He was planning on going to chiropractic. So it was a friend of mine. And I ended up kind of wanting to learn more. And I had been to a chiropractor when I was in high school. I was injured in baseball. He rehabbed me back, the chiropractor, got me back on the field within a week or two. And so that was kind of my first soiree into chiropractic. But I went and worked for a chiropractor for about 2 years while I was going to school at UT, seeing like, do I like the profession? Is that something I want to do? And helped build the guy's clinic up. I actually increased his volume I created a referral program myself where I got bonuses for bringing in referrals. And then I figured out how to bring in patients both internally and externally. And that's kind of my first dive into that. And I love the hands-on approach as well as the holistic approach of chiropractic and being able to heal them before they got to medicine or surgery or things like that. And so I loved it. I wanted to help people. And that was kind of the direction I went. And I went to chiropractic school from there.
Yeah, so it's interesting to me because you then built a successful, you were successful in that field. And it's not in my experience, I find that in general, obviously not across, but in general, chiropractors tend to be much more entrepreneurial than, let's say, medical doctors, right? Or other people in the health profession. It just seems to be, I know many more of them. But the difference is, they're entrepreneurial in that maybe they're open their own practice. Maybe they have, multiple locations. Maybe they do some other things on the side, but they usually don't have the journey that you have where they've moved from that to tech to, so tell us about, I think the place I'd love to start on, because I talk about it a lot, is like mindset, right? Obviously you had a different mindset than even your sort of typical entrepreneurial, quote unquote, chiropractor, right? Most of them don't have the journey that you've had. So talk to me a little bit about your mindset. And did you come in to chiropractic thinking bigger than having just a practice? Were you always interested in other areas? How did that evolve?
I always had big goals, even from when I was 6 years old. I wanted 1,000 acres to go hunt, right? I'm a small town kid, likes hunting and fishing. And so to be able to achieve that goal, you need to build big things. And so I always knew I wanted to do something big. I got into chiropractic. I knew you only have one first impression especially when you start a business. So I went and worked for somebody for a year or two because you learn the school side in school, but you don't learn the business aspect, right? And so I ran a clinic that I managed myself underneath somebody else and did that for 2 years, went out to go start my own. And when I started my own, I'd already kind of had some idea of how to grow it and how to build the business. But I ended up joining on with a consultant through another doctor I knew. And that consultant was pricey. It was over $2,000 a month for consulting fee when all I had was a $24,000 loan to start my business. And people said, you're crazy. You're spending 1/10 of your loan amount to start this business on this consultant. But in my mind, I said, if he can teach me to gain one new patient, and I saw the value of the patient around that amount, one new patient a month on these kind of niche marketing campaigns, on going on higher target value, like treatments, I saw the value. And as long as you can get one, it pays for itself. Anymore, it's, the juice on the top. And so I really quickly became the biggest practice in town. In the small town I was in, there was 6 other chiropractors, about 15,000 population. And within a year, I was seeing 40 patients a day. And so I grew to be the biggest, did really good. But then within a year, I was like, okay, I now maxed out. I grew as much as I could in this town with this practice. And so my next step was, do I then start creating other practices? But chiropractic is a very hands-on personal business.
Yeah.
And so just because I can do it, like I can teach certain things, but you have to have the personality. You have to also be able to feel certain things and be able to diagnose and treat a certain way. And then you have to have the business side. And to put all 3 together and try to train somebody else to do what I was doing, I thought it was going to be pretty tough to scale in that way. And I also realized I was trading time for money. And once I started realizing I was trading time for money, I said, okay, I'm in the wrong business. And so I started building some other things on the side. I met a really great business partner who's still my business partner today. And we started jamming on ideas. He was starting a business in Fredericksburg where we were at. And we started to come up with ideas and we started to test them out, like selling crawfish to our local HEB and actually all of Central Texas. And so we were shipping them in from Louisiana, made enough in the first year that we were buying refrigerated trucks and shipping them in after that. And then, we built an e-com business where we were buying from Walmart pallets of propane tanks and selling them on Amazon. I've bought 18-wheeler trucks and broker deals where I was selling to oil field companies. And then we came up with this idea for Skip Cart. And once we came up with that one, that was kind of the aha moment of, this one's big. This is not just a side hustle. And I had to make a decision. Am I going to be a chiropractor or going to be an entrepreneur? And I'm going to go for something a lot larger. It was a tough decision, but luckily I had a wife that was behind me and I took the leap.
So up until that point, all these others were side hustles. You were still in chiropractic.
Correct.
But you were doing these other things. So talk to us about coming up with this, idea for Skip Cart. How did that happen? How did that evolve? And then, yeah, so we have a few things in here. I know you had a business partner. That's a deal, right? And that's business partnerships don't always work out, right? So I'd love to hear your, how you've had, and obviously you've continued to have that partnership in this business. So like some things about how you do a successful business partnership deal, but then also how you grew Skip Cart and obviously Risk Capital and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, happy to walk through that. So met Ben Jones. He was starting a bar, but he had already previously built up he was hauling aggregate. So he had a trucking company in the oil field prior to that. And he was a higher up in oil field along his career. But 2014 hit, oil field went zero. He went bankrupt, right? He needed to go and start over from ground up. And so him and I sat down and we started coming up with these little side gigs, but it was a talk with a manager at HEB. That's the largest grocer in Texas.
Yeah.
A manager at our local HEB came to Ben and said, hey, I know you're an entrepreneur. You try to create all these different things. HEB is worried about Amazon. Amazon just put over $100 million into Whole Foods. And so they saw the writing on the wall of Amazon's coming after grocery. And this was in 2017. And so in 2017, he came to this idea. Ben came to me and said, hey, I think we can create a delivery company and sell it to HEB. And so he came to the idea and we were like, well, let's pilot it. And so we put an ad in the local newspaper, said, hey, we'll go and do your deliveries. Forgot what we charged. It didn't really matter. We wanted to see, did it catch? Was there enough people wanting delivery, right? And we were getting calls left and right. And so we would go and actually deliver it ourselves, right? We'd go and even shop it because they didn't even have curbside at that point. And so we would go and shop it. We'd get the groceries and then we would go and take it to your house. And so it wasn't profitable, but it was more of, is this a viable business option? And so once we started seeing that, we ended up going, we had some connections and we built a team together that they knew of developers. We actually used developers out of India that they had used in the past on one of our business partners' prior ventures. And so we utilized this team. We built out the software, probably about a little over $250,000 that it cost us to build it all out. Built that out. And then HEB, we had a contract with them. They loved it. HEB actually offered us $10 million before we did our first delivery to buy our app. And we had to make a decision then of, do we take $10 million? We spent about $250,000 or a little more than that to build this thing. we can cash out in less than a year on 10 million. We turned around and said, hey, make it 30 and we'll make it a deal. And they said, no dice. And they ended up going on and buying another delivery company for, I think, around 150 million, which was called Favor, that had already been delivering for them. And so then we didn't have a partner anymore. The person we were building it out for was now gone. And so for about 8 months, we didn't have anywhere to go with this delivery company. And we had this app that we built out. And Ben, being a great salesman that he was, he flew over to California, talked to Walmart, and then we got a one-store pilot with Walmart. And that was where I had to make a decision. He came to myself and the team and said, all right, there's nobody that's halfway in. You're either all in or you're all out. And I had to make a decision. Do I want to go and watch them build something that I believe could be massive and not be a part of it? Or was I willing to put it all on the line and sell my business and go all in on a one-store pilot? And the rest was history. Was very fortunate that we made it work, but I went all in from there.
Yeah. So let's break down a couple of things. So first of all, to be able to do that, not only confidence in the idea, but also confidence in your partner, right, in this. So talk to me about that partnership decision, because, partnerships aren't easy, right? There's a lot of people who say they like marriages in a lot of ways, right? Because you got finances and you got time together and you got personalities and you got whatever. So tell me what was, and I'm assuming most good partnerships have complementary skills, different people do different things. Talk to me about the business partnership a little bit.
Yeah. So Ben had already built a really big company in his prior life, right? And so I saw the skill set that he had to get deals done. And in terms of visionary, I've really met nobody like him up to that point, and even up to this point now. He's a unique individual with a skill set not many have, and not just being able to execute, which he does as well, but he has vision of seeing 5 years, 10 years down the road and see problems or solutions that other people don't see.
Yeah.
And so as much as I was betting on the business on that one, which I was betting on the business, I saw delivery as a really viable solution. And then I saw Favor get bought for 150 million. I knew there was value in building a big delivery company. And then right around the same time, Shipt was bought by Target for 500 million. I knew there was potential for massive exit. And so I knew the potential was there, but I was actually more probably betting on the individual than I was even the business. And so I bet on Ben. He bet on me. I was a chiropractor, but he saw I hustled. Him and I built other things. If I say I'm going to get something done, I'm going to get it done. I don't let it fall to the wayside. And, we kind of bet on each other, as well as we had two other co-founders alongside us. One from his previous experience. He was an older individual. He'd been around the block. He'd done a bunch of stuff in a lot of different sectors. And so we built up a really good team and scaled it out. But at the beginning days, it was all us. And so we flew to Toledo, Ohio. I had a daughter on the way. I was only married for 6 months. And I lived in Toledo, Ohio in the winter, and I'm a Texas boy. And so I was sitting there doing deliveries in the snow on a one-store pilot because we weren't going to let it fail. And then we went to 5 stores, and then it started getting tougher because then we couldn't do all the deliveries. And so we had to figure out ways to get drivers. And, there was a couple of aha moments along the way that really help us get to scale. But in terms of the partnership, he was my friend first. And so we already had some trust there, but I've also lost friendships through business on the other side. And so you find out who people really are in business past the friendship part, because now it's not friendship, it's business. And Ben and I, we've been able to keep an amazing friendship. He's family to us and my family, and it's persisted on even past Skip Cart.
Love that. Love that. All right. And then I want to get into Skip Cart and then obviously get to what you're doing now. But you said you sold so you had this crucial decision point, right? And you sold the chiropractic. Did you sell that to an outside buyer, or did you sell that to people who, team that work for you, or how'd you?
So I actually sold it to a friend of mine from school. So he was struggling. He was in Florida. He wasn't where he wanted to be in business wise.
Yep.
And I said, hey, I have a practice. I have to sell it. Typical practices will take over a year to sell. I only had 3 months. And I said, hey, if you want this business, I'll give it to you for pennies on the dollar, but I got to get out from underneath it. I had a lot of debt because I bought a building within the first year of starting my practice. Okay. And so I had the property, I had a lot of different equipment and everything else. And so I said, hey, I'll rent you the building. I'll sell you the practice. And so I had him come in, and that's where I was talking about that deal didn't end up the same. And our friendship actually took a hit after that one. And it's unfortunate, but sometimes in business, things don't always go as planned. And so that one went sideways, but ended up selling to him, built Skip Card out, and ended up kind of really going from having a 5-store pilot, and we figured out 3 days before the pilot was over how to finally get drivers to do our orders. And it was really an aha moment of, okay, we can actually scale this, because we were about to go to 7 states and we didn't have enough people to go to 7 states with Walmart. But I wanted to go to a Spurs game up in Detroit. And my business partner said, okay, get drivers to start doing deliveries where you don't, and you can go to the game. And I ended up changing from on-demand delivery to, I had 4-hour time blocks, and I created 4-hour time blocks for drivers, and I would guarantee them $20 an hour, but they had to drive all 4 hours and they had to pick up 100% of orders from their store. And if you didn't get the guarantee. And I did that for 2 days. It was working. I got on a train, went to Detroit, and around 7 o'clock when it was game time, my business partner said, hey, like, where are you at? You got to go pick up this delivery. Driver's not picking it up. I was like, dude, I'm on a train. Like, I can't go and pick it up. And I text the driver. I was like, hey, there's an order at your store. Driver went and got it. And, that was kind of beginning of 2019 when that really scaled up. And then 2020 hit. COVID took delivery through the roof. We scaled up. We were already doing grocery, AutoZone, 7-Eleven, any food, you name it, we've done. We raised about 22 million in a Series A during COVID, and then, scaled it up, really built up the team, and then sold to 7-Eleven afterwards.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can tell you about an incredible resource my team and I have put together for you. Secrets of Deal-Driven Growth, Creative Ways to Grow Your Business, Even in Challenging Times, is a powerful ebook that helps you take DealQuest podcast episodes and apply them to your own life and business. This is the ideal tool for anyone looking for creative ways to grow as deal makers, and you can get yours now. It's as easy as heading to coreycupford.com/workbook and downloading your copy. While you're there, you can also consider joining our dynamic deal-driven community of founders, experts, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. Now back for the show. Let's talk about the capital raising piece of that. At what point did you, and what was the capital journey, right? You said a Series A. Usually there are rounds before that, whether it's a seed or angel or friends and family, So talk about the capital raising journey and the decision points on when you decided to raise capital.
Yeah, so the first capital raise, we built out the product on our own dime, and then once we got the contract with Walmart, and that was in July, we launched in December. From that point, we put all of our LLC, everything together, and started doing a capital campaign. I think we raised 600,000 or 700,000 in that period of time. That kind of gave us some operations. We didn't pay ourselves any big salaries or anything like that, but it got us going and helped us continue to build our tech and kind of improve it during that pilot phase. And so we raised about 600 or 700. Then we got through the pilot, which went from beginning of or middle of December of 18 to, I think, beginning of February. And so it was about 2-month pilot. After that, we got past the pilot phase. We scaled into 7 states. Once we scaled into 7 states with Walmart, we went back to investors and we raised another round because at the time we weren't profitable. And so we were paying drivers. I think we were getting paid around 10 or so dollars per delivery. And we were paying drivers more than that. And so we were losing money per delivery, but we weren't at scale, and we didn't have the volume that, say, DoorDash did. And so how do you get a driver to go and do our order versus a DoorDash order and stay on our app? We paid them a little bit more of a premium just because we had to, because we didn't have the volume in our early days. And so we went and raised that second round. I think that was around another 800,000. I think by the end of the first 2 seed rounds, we were at about 1.6. That was all within a year. We ended up, COVID hit. We actually had to scale down for a bit because we had a Series A that was just about to sign the check before COVID hit. And it fell through because everybody ratcheted back and they were worried about, okay, how is the economy going to react to all this?
Sure.
Even though delivery became massive, we lost that deal. We ended up having to kind of ratchet things back. We even scaled back in some markets for a period of time. And we were working on the capital raise the whole entire time. And then Ben was able to go out and raise that 20 million from a group out of Germany, actually, and raise 20 million on the Series A. And then we really started scaling it back up and capitalizing on all the opportunities that were out there.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I mean, it was great timing. It was one of the things I always say about deals and whatever is that, people make blanket statements about how the impact of various things, whether it's technology, whether it's recession, whether it's and no matter what the circumstances, there's always opportunity for business growth and deals in certain sectors. Obviously, some get crushed and some get, and for example, we do a lot in financial services, we do a lot in tech. A lot of our clients actually grew through the pandemic. We don't have a lot of restaurant, clients, for example, right? And, and I know personally, my habits totally changed. I mean, I never used Instacart before the pandemic. I did a little bit of the food delivery ones, the Grubhubs and the DoorDashes but not like, but it just so interesting because you ended up selling to 7-Eleven. Walmart was your biggest, right, customer. You would think they might be, a logical buyer. How did 7-Eleven come into the picture?
So actually, Walmart did offer to buy us as well.
Okay.
So Walmart offered to buy us. We ended up cutting ties with Walmart, I think 2 weeks before COVID hit.
Okay.
We cut ties. It's actually, there's a Bloomberg article on it. And we were, I think, the second or the third delivery company at that point to stop working with Walmart. There was issues kind of on our side where, I don't want to go into all the details, but the partnership wasn't great on our end. Yeah. Walmart has since become amazing at their delivery. Like they've learned a lot through that COVID period.
Yes.
And, it's top notch, but we ended up kind of separating on that side. We also had a DoorDash offer along the way as well. And then ended up selling to 7-Eleven. But I would say a couple months into COVID is when we started that relationship with 7-Eleven. And so we started delivering for them a couple months into COVID. They do 30-minute delivery. And so where we were used to your 1 hour delivery with your grocery, and even we'd get grocery a couple hours in advance, with 7-Eleven, it was 30 minutes. And you get it, and you need to be able to, from when you receive the order to when you deliver, it needs to be 30 minutes. And that's what they guarantee their customers. And so they piloted with a bunch of different, either both big and smaller delivery companies. Most of the smaller ones couldn't do it. Like they weren't able to do rapid, fast delivery under 30 minutes. And we were probably the only small one outside of your DoorDash and Uber that were able to maintain the quality that 7-Eleven wanted, and at the same time be able to go into all the different markets that they needed. And so they really, not very easy to go buy DoorDash or Uber at that point. They had already IPO'd. And so you're not going to go get them. And 7-Eleven wanted to vertically integrate, and they didn't want to be beholden to DoorDash or Uber. And they wanted to start building out their own marketplace. They have a great app themselves, but the more they could build out a marketplace with restaurants and other things, they could essentially bundle orders with the 7-Eleven. It's like, okay, you want to get your Applebee's order, but you also want, White Claw and some cigarettes from 7-Eleven. We can put all that in one order, bundle it together, and it was a way for them to cross sell and start working on a marketplace. And so we were a great target for them to kind of vertically integrate their stack.
And just to be clear, so there's like you had relationships, like for example, if I go to an Instacart or a DoorDash or whatever, right? I'm going on the app, and this is just an app that delivers for, a bunch of different stores, right? Did you have more of was this a situation where like 7-Eleven was taking orders directly, right? And you were delivering for them, as opposed to, like, it wasn't like the customer went on your app, like a DoorDash,
so
right? It was the other side of things, right?
Correct. Customers didn't even know who Skipcart was.
Right.
And so we were a white label delivery company. We were actually kind of the first one to really start kind of going into that white label space and at scale. And our foot in the door originally with Walmart was, yes, DoorDash and Uber were going and delivering for them. Nobody wanted to go to the smaller markets. We said, hey, we'll be your white label provider in all your small markets that nobody wants to go into. And so we got our foot in the door. We figured out delivery by finding a niche that nobody else wanted to serve at that point in time. And that's what got our foot in the door. It built our name up. And then we went into the big cities, but we kind of went backwards, and we started in small towns and then went into big cities later on as we scaled and as COVID hit.
Listen, for listeners, there's been several episodes where I've sort of preached that I think white label, whether it's product or service, is one of the most underutilized business models, deal approaches out there, and that there's so much opportunity for people to do that in various fields. We've had some recent guests on who have done that in various ways.
With your big brands like your Walmarts and 7-Elevens, They don't want them going through DoorDash, right? Because then they can't do their offers that they want. They want their brand awareness. They want to be able to capture really it's the data, right? They want to know what the data is of the customer and what they're ordering and how often they're ordering it. But when it's going through DoorDash and not going through 7-Eleven, they have no clue about the data of the individuals. But 7-Eleven has massive amounts of data and they want to keep that internally. And so that's where the white label really, it works well with a lot of the big brands.
Yeah, it's used. I mean, listen, a lot of these companies want to do big data, right? All these analyses, and it's a similar. It's almost like the company parallel to this conversation of when if you are a speaker or an influencer or whatever, and you build your brand on a social media platform, and then that social media platform disappears, whether it's mine or whatever, or it changes its algorithm or whatever, what they're doing. So, so you're building on rented land. It's the same thing for these. If, Walmart has DoorDash, they're building on rented land. DoorDash is the one that owns the customer relationship. DoorDash is the one that has the data on it. So just like you as a speaker and influencer want to get people in your database, right, to be able to market to them, to be able to, own that customer relationship and to be able to analyze it. This is that equivalent. So yeah, no, it's huge. Okay. So you exit this company. You don't have to share the numbers, but obviously if you raised 20 million and, I'm sure you did very well on this based upon the other offers you had early on. So now I want to talk about, and this is going to, sort of switch us into what you're doing now. When it's always interesting when entrepreneurs exit, right? On whether they, first of all, we've talked about this podcast a bunch that there are sometimes where people exit for life-changing or even generation-changing money, and they actually become depressed, right? Like literally, it's a problem. Sure. Other folks rarely, and I have a couple of exceptions out there, does somebody really truly go off into the sunset and do whatever it is for them, play golf or travel the world or whatever. They may do that for a little bit of time. But especially somebody, at your age, right? Obviously you did choose to have an next venture. Did you jump right into it? Did you take time? What was your mentality after, you had this successful exit?
So we got paid on the front end. And so we got all of our money on the front end and we got some bonuses on retaining us and staying on board with 7-Eleven. Okay. But I had a couple of different goals in mind before I wanted to leave. One, I wanted to hit certain delivery numbers that I always had as my internal goal for Skipcart. And so more of an internal kind of pride and motivation of building my company to a certain size. Exactly. And I cared about it. And so I wanted to hit certain numbers myself, as well as I wanted to fulfill the goals of what 7-Eleven wanted. I wanted to be able to build the team out and do what we say we could do with 7-Eleven. So that was part of my plan, was help them build that out, regardless of being paid or not. And then next was, I'm a great one-man wrecking crew, right? Like you send me on the hardest task, I'll go get it done. But there were some things on being able to manage teams that I didn't manage as big of a team as I could if I would have stayed on longer and build up 7-Eleven. And so I wanted to stay on. I wanted to build up teams. I wanted to manage people. I wanted to hone some of my management skills a little bit too, and understand the corporate side of things, like the good, the bad, the ugly, like everything. I wanted to understand big corporate life because I had never lived that life before. And so I wanted to figure out big corporate. I stayed on. There's certain things I loved and I have taken into this business. There's some stuff that I despise and hate, and I'm happy I own my own business again and I don't have to work for a company like that. And so there's a lot of learning lessons in that I wanted to achieve myself. But like I said, I got the money. I was playing golf twice a week for the first 6 months, right? I always wanted to go back and get on the golf course. I played a lot growing up. I was out there on the golf course playing 18 holes twice a week, living it up. And about 6 months into that, I was like, what the hell am I doing? Yeah. Like, it was unfulfilling to me. Like, I got to go out there and be outdoors and play golf, but it wasn't satisfying me in terms of I'm only on this earth for a certain period of time. And I've been blessed with skill sets and the ability to do certain things and being put in positions where I've been able to succeed. And I'm just sitting there wasting my life doing selfish things. And I was like, I need to go out and continue to keep building. And there was part of me up to that point at Skipcart, I wanted to make a bunch of money. I'm not saying I don't want to make a bunch of money now, but I was always more of a selfish drive of succeeding and making a bunch of money. I did that. And as you said, it didn't fulfill me. Like I didn't like, oh, I'm there, I'm done. Yeah. Part of my personality is I have that mentality of Tom Brady's quote of, what's your favorite ring? And the one I love is it's the next one.
Yeah.
And I have a similar drive of I can get it. And then once I get it, I want more. I want more. But then in this time of kind of working for 7-Eleven, I kind of able to do some look introspectively at myself of, is that necessarily the best way of always kind of being of more, consume. You're like, it doesn't necessarily make you happy at the end of the day. And so I started looking at what can I build that not just makes me money, but makes an impact on others. Like up to this point, all I did is deliver your hamburgers and your groceries.
Right.
You know, I was more impactful on human lives, I would think, with chiropractic than I was with just dropping off your hamburger. And so I wanted to make more of an impact. And this is where my business partner, Ben Jones, and I, like I said, we're family friends. And so we took a road trip with our families. He had his kids and my kids. We went in his Sprinter van, you know, it had all the bells and whistles. We had restrooms and everything else, but we did about 3,000-mile road trip with 5 kids in the car and 3 adults. And we went across the US. And that was the first time him and I had really sat down and started jamming on ideas since the exit, because he exited soon after we sold. I stayed on for 2 years and we started going through ideas, and he's got some massive ideas and things. I'm like, dude, that's great. I didn't want to go for moonshots anymore. Skip Cart was a moonshot and we hit, but those are few and far between. And I know how lucky we were on timing and everything else to make it happen. And I didn't want to go for as much of a moonshot. I wanted something that was a little more solid than the Skip Cart type bet that still made impact. And he came up with this idea of, he started talking about his dad has a drilling business in North Texas, ended up having some heart issues, ended up selling the business for next to nothing, right? It didn't have the generation that wanted to go and take it over, didn't have a great exit strategy, and essentially 20 plus years of work down the drain and didn't get anything to show for it. He said, most of these small businesses don't have a great exit to begin with. They don't have a great exit, or they don't know how to exit. That was the first part of the problem. And then second, when you get to a certain size of business, most of these businesses, it's only private equity that they can sell to these days, because your solo entrepreneur can't afford to put down $2 million in cash to buy some of these businesses. And so you're just sitting in this private equity realm, and you kind of talk about what people think about private equity. For the most part, and the people that own the small businesses, they don't look well on private equity. They look at them as the evil overlords that are out there trying to take your company, squeeze it, and they don't care about your people. They don't care about your brand. They don't care about your customers. They care about profits. And at the end of the day, they don't care if they gut your company, they ruin your brand, as long as they make money. That's what people kind of see on private equity. And he said, what if we come in there with a different mentality? We don't want to buy and have a short-term hold of 5 years and then spin it off and sell it off to another private equity company. Instead, let's have a long-term hold approach where we buy and hold the company. We don't gut it. We don't get rid of all the people to squish margins, keep the team intact, and over time, build up employee ownership where you can give equity back to the employees, where now they have skin in the game for the first time probably in their life of ever owning stock or equity in anything. And you give them motivation to not only stay on after the acquisition, but to continue growing it and building on it, because now they have vested interest in growing this business and making it successful as well. And so he came to me with this idea. And as soon as he said it, I was like, dude, I'm in. I was like, when are we going to go do this one? And about 6 months later, we kind of put the team together and originally started off looking at Latin America as our first market to tackle. Huge opportunity in LATAM, but the market's just not ready for private equity at that type of scale. And it's tough to validate numbers. It's tough to find businesses because there's not a marketplace like a biz buy sell or something like that down in LATAM. And so we tried it for about 4 months. We realized we were just spinning our wheels. And we said, okay, let's not try to be the first to the race. Let's go into the US where the market's much larger. The TAM is massive. And we can go after these businesses that still have the same problem, but also we can raise finances for debt funding, equity financing, everything else. We were finding tough time raising capital for LATAM, but in the US, it was a whole different story.
Love it. Okay, so let's talk about the model a bit. So you're not only using your own capital, right? Did you raise a fund? Is that what you ended up doing?
So we didn't raise a fund. We kind of did deal by deal. We ended up first, we needed to prove to ourselves we can go get a good deal
Yeah.
And we needed to find out what a good deal was. We had people on the team that have done M&A,
Yeah.
but we went to a bunch of different banks. We got the relationships there first, try to understand what does a bank look for in a deal. And because if it's not financeable by a bank, we're not paying for this thing in cash.
Right.
And so we built out a way of, as we get these SIMs in and all these financials from these companies, we put it into our software. It sits there and reads the 50-page document with all the financials, and it puts it in an Excel spreadsheet with 40 different things that the bank is going to look at in terms of the market, the CAGR, the debt load, all these different things that a bank is going to look at, and how we should look at to see if it's a good company in a good market in a good vertical. And then we started scraping the internet. And so we built out a scraper that scrapes 80,000 businesses, I think, last year. It goes by our criteria. It finds what we look at, which is needs to be 10 years in business, needs to have over 15% net margins, needs to have more than 2 business managers in place, because we don't want a one-man show in this thing. And so we have these different criteria we set on our software, and we put it in there, and it's essentially red light, yellow light, green lights, all these different criteria that we then got. It was 5 companies under LOI over about a 6-month span. 3 of them, after we did the due diligence and got a little bit deeper, we said, hey, it's not a good business. We figured that out rather quickly. About 2 weeks in, we kind of just killed the deal. And 2 of them we ended up getting to execution and close the deal on. And so we wanted to find the business. B, we went and found the funding afterwards. But we were confident because of our track record of not just myself and Ben's, but also our other founders. We are successfully exited founders that we can go to our existing investor pool, friends, families, and past investors, and they know that we can get it done. And so as soon as we got to that point where we got the bank financing, we then went to investors. We actually raised on a SAFE round. And so instead of a fund, we did SAFE on the top co level. We raised that for operational funds, and then we used some of our own cash as well to close the deals. And that's what we did on the raise of our first 2.
Love it. And talk to me about the employee ownership aspect of it. Is this something that is in the plans, or is this something that employees are already getting ownership? And the thing that's interesting to me is because we do a lot of call them attraction, retention, and incentive vehicles, right? Whether that's actually true equity, whether that's or it's restricted units, or it's phantom equity, or it's profit sharing plans, all this kind of stuff. And one of the things I always talk to my clients about on that is that one of the biggest mistakes sometimes people make, well, there's a few mistakes make. One, they don't match the retention incentive attraction vehicle to what the employees really care about or want. And 2, and they're tied together, they don't set the right atmosphere, provide the education and the culture, whatever, because us entrepreneurs often assume that people understand the value of equity, for example, like up front. And frankly, a lot of employees, and this is not like a judgment or whatever, it's just not, they come from a different background, a different world, a different whatever. And,
Sure.
a lot of them might be just trying to make a few more bucks and right to be able to feed their family or put away money for college, right? And that long-term thinking of back-end enterprise value or what equity can mean. I mean, even me growing up, I was a low middle class kid, right? I didn't understand stocks and equity or anything like that until I became a lawyer, honestly. My parents didn't have the money to invest. I mean, they subsequently did, but not when I was growing up. So my point is that, there's a body of work that I've seen success companies do to even have employees understand. And certainly if there's an employee, whether it's moving into an ESOP or some other just restricted stock situation, whatever, to first of all, figure out what the model is and what they're going to get. And then also have them understand the value of that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So we didn't buy it under ESOP because we didn't want to jump through all the legal hurdles of acquiring through ESOP, right? And so our first deal was an SBA deal. We maxed out the SBA. It was on the smaller side. That's when we realized we needed to go for a little bit larger deal. And our second one was conventional loan. And so the reason why I bring that up, depending on the loans, bank side, we can't sit there and be giving away equity in the company while we still owe debt to the banks, right? And so there is certain key employees that we are vesting shares already in. And so they're already vesting shares, but there's certain triggers that don't happen according to make sure we don't break any bank covenants, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of the whole employee base, which we planned to do as well, is we need to first build all that structure out. We wanted to first do kind of the transition, get the businesses cranking, get them going, make sure that we transition, we walk into the culture properly. and build that out kind of moving forward. And so that's something we're still kind of in the works on most of it. Key employees, we have set certain things up for on one of the companies. And so it's kind of working through that as we go along. But a lot of the times you're held to these bank covenants and you can't be sitting there giving away equity until you pay down that. And so we're structuring it. We're going to present it to the whole entire team kind of once we have everything in place where we're not going to break any bank covenants. We got everything transitioned, and then start putting it out there of, hey, you can vest these stocks, and once these triggers hit, you'll get this equity. And then really set the expectation of what does that mean for you? Does that mean, revenue sharing? Does that mean once you leave, we buy the stock back, all that type of stuff. And so a lot of those details we're kind of still working through, but for the most part, we have an idea of where we want to go with all of it.
Love it. Yeah. And I don't want to push you to reveal anything that's not baked or that's not been disclosed. But
Sure.
like philosophically, though, is the intention for you guys to maintain majority control and have minorities to the employees? And then is there, like, again, contrasting to typical private equity, is there an exit timing, in mind, or is it a long-term hold, play? Like, what's the philosophical approach? You don't even have to talk specifically about any of the companies, but.
Yeah. So in terms of two-part question, but like in terms of the employees and giving them the equity and kind of where their exit is, the plan is when they leave the company, as long as they've vested their shares, when they leave the company, we buy them back, right? And so that is essentially like a golden parachute of, hey, you stayed on, you showed loyalty, you got us past all this transition, we successfully paid all this different stuff down. Here's your equity. And we want to keep incentivizing them even to stay on longer if they want. But
Sure.
once they leave, they have an exit in place, right? And regardless of us having an exit or not.
Right.
And so that's kind of, that's the first part of the deal on how we're wanting to structure it. But then in terms of control, we are giving minority control to the employees. We still want to maintain operational control and equity control of the business, so that we can make sure it's going in the right direction because we're doing this long-term hold kind of play on it. And then I would say our long-term strategy for Equity X is we want to build it up where we put all these things in place where even if we do exit down the road, let's call it 5 or 6 years, we want to exit to a large company that wants to come and buy our whole portfolio. We don't want to go and piecemeal off individual businesses over time, right? We want to keep everything together, and we're focused on manufacturing and construction. And so we're going deep in these two verticals, but our long-term goal is we want to build this where we don't have to sell it. We want to build it where our investors can sit there and get dividends for the next decades coming up and continue just to compound all this on top of each other. You have these employees that are bought in, right? You have these companies that are moving everything forward. If you can continue to keep building this business, your investors are going to be happy by getting just dividends and the compound growth of the stock. And at a point, like we have triggers where they can, hey, if they want to sell it, they can sell it back to us. We'll buy it back as a company and exit them out. But the plan is not to flip it off in 5 years. It is a longer hold strategy, but I can't say, hey, if somebody comes and offers us a large amount, like, are we going to sell it? We'll sell the whole thing as a once, or all vertical, right? All construction or all manufacturing. But the overall goal is build it where you don't have to.
Love it. All right. And then last question before my final two. So you talked about some of the criteria of what you look for in terms of the two industry segments, in terms of, management, right? Having certain management team in place, things like that. Is there anything else in terms of size, geography, or anything like that in terms of the criteria, just in case there's listeners who have opportunities they want to.
Yeah. So we found some really great banking relationships, especially in the earlier days. We found was we have banks that are willing to fund us as long as it's 3 million in EBITDA. And so these conventional banks, when you start going outside of SBA, we are able to go and buy these companies without personal guarantees behind it because there's enough cash flow and there's enough assets within the business that the business is leverage enough to be able to, you go and put 20% cash down, which is kind of what we found as standard. You put 20% of cash down, but you need a $3 million EBITDA floor. And so our first business, SBA, was upper SBA, was around 2.5 or so in EBITDA. Our other business was considerably higher than that $3 million floor. And so our criteria is a $3 million floor on it. And we want those 15% margins, right? And so that's kind of one of our criteria. Since then, we've actually found that we have some banking partners that have allowed us to drop the floor if we want. But the problem, what we found is When you start going too small, though, then you don't have those managers in place. You're going to have to go and run that company yourself. And if that's your goal, great, but that's not our goal. Like we want to give them overarching like direction, but we don't want to run the company. We want to put people in place or promote people that are already there and have them run the company. And so we want to stay in the larger kind of lane, but not 30, 40, 50 million EBITDA company. We're kind of that 3 to 10 million EBITDA range. It's kind of the sweet spot that we found where we can raise the capital for that. It's larger. We're not playing against solo entrepreneurs, and we can get good deal financing for it at good terms. And then in terms of markets, I told you the verticals we're going after, but in terms of markets, we want to go after markets that are growth markets in terms of the United States, where we're not going into probably a small town that is relying on XYZ or you're seeing that the population is decreasing or whatever, right? We want to be in a healthy market. One of ours is like you said, was in Vegas, and the others in Long Island. So we want healthy markets where you can also bring in new talent too, and they're happy to go and move into that town. And it's not this random podunk town with 3 stoplights like I grew up in when I was younger.
I love it. So if people want to find out more about you, about EquityX, where should they go?
So equityx.co is our website. You can go in there, take a look at kind of what we're doing, reach out on that. Happy to chat in terms of if they're looking to sell a business. We're always on the look for the next business that meets kind of the criteria we're looking for. And at the same time, investors, we're always raising capital because we're always continuing to buy companies. And so that's the best place to find us.
Awesome. So Neal, my final question on the podcast is always about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom around the world for everybody from oppression to why I've been an entrepreneur for decades and haven't had a boss. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
What does freedom mean to me? I would say freedom to me, I've already kind of gotten past a lot of it in terms of financial. And so freedom to me moving forward is being able to go after the endeavors and build the things that I want without having restrictions in place. But success to me, to kind of go a little bit further on that, I used to always base it on a monetary value of hitting certain numbers, being a billionaire, doing all that kind of stuff, building businesses. As I've gotten older, I have 3 kids. Success to me is when I'm 70 years old and my kids are adults, do they still want to hang out with me because I was a good dad and then I raised them properly and I always took care of them and I was a good adult at the same time and a good human. And so that's my benchmark that I shoot for.
Love that. Neal Cobb, thanks for being such a great guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Appreciate it, Corey. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. If you are interested in finding out more about my law firm, the services we provide to entrepreneurial and growing companies across industries all over the country, and my partner Brian Megan and I, and my amazing team, just head over to kupferlaw.com. That's kupferlaw.com. And if you want to follow more of my content, head over to my LinkedIn page where I post regularly. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.